Here on the Power Struggle podcast, we love looking at the challenges of energy, supplying the world with the energy it needs to do what people want to do with their lives. And today I have Dr. Anthony Ciccone here. He's an expert in an area of energy that he spent his career on, asking a question most people don't think to ask. How do you actually power the places that the grid forgot? He's the Senior Vice President of the Global Nuclear Sector at WSP. That's at the intersection of engineering reality and energy policy across new builds and refurbishment and waste management. We're going to hear all about this. Dr. Anthony Ciccone, welcome to Power Struggle.
Thank you, sir. Pleasure to be here.
I hear you're a bit of an expert in the world of small modular reactors.
I know a little bit about the subject. I've been involved in it for a few years now. It's topical, very much so across the globe and especially in Canada.
Well, recently I heard you speak in Calgary, Alberta, and that's why I'm inviting you on to Power Struggle today, because I was just fascinated by what you brought to the stage, because we were talking about northern Canada, I think Arctic and remote places generally, and what you had to say clearly had the room on edge. People were not on edge, on the edge of their seats. They wanted to hear more, and you brought your insights into it, because there's an instinct in energy policy to treat renewables and nuclear as competitors. And I think one thing I left thinking about was, oh, wait a minute, is that an assumption that is going to be as convincing when you look at the remote north and some of your ideas about how that's powered. So I thought that could be a really great jumping off point, including, the comparison of nuclear versus what people see as the alternative future of energy in their lives, especially in places that are challenging to develop energy for. So that's what I wanted to talk with you about today.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, that's a great topic. And renewables and nuclear are really complementary. They're not competing against each other. And you sort of take it of the view is that renewables are there to lower the amount of energy that you would use in most cases, or the amount of energy that's being generated. Nuclear generates base load. It's there as a replacement for the existing power generation, carbon-intense fuels, and it provides a carbon-free energy source, which is gives you quite a bit of sustainability in the future when you look at the total greenhouse gas life cycle. So they are not competing; they are complementary to one another. So especially up in the north, where we don't have a lot of water and such things as that are very important, nuclear can fit in quite well, and renewable energies such as solar and wind. Sometimes the sun don't shine and the wind doesn't blow all at the opportune times, and nuclear provides that backbone of baseload power that everyone needs.
Now, Anthony, I just wanted to start by looking at your preparation and your credentials for being the expert you are in this space. You have a PhD in this area. Tell us about where you got that from and how you narrowed your focus in your studies.
Okay, well, actually, my PhD is in mechanical engineering from the University of Toronto. But I started off when I came out of school with an engineering degree. I was hired on by a consulting firm, and it's like most young engineers, you're eager to do any work being thrown at you. So they started throwing interesting projects like nuclear waste at me, and said they needed me to figure out how much waste was being generated, not by the power plants, but from research reactors, from medical facilities, because Canada did not have an inventory of waste. So I started dabbling in that, and I became more and more interested in that as we got along. Started looking at the impact of nuclear on people and animals and livelihoods. But eventually nuclear took a bit of a downturn at the time. So I went back to school to get a PhD in mechanical engineering. And one of the things I was looking at was, believe it or not, nuclear tailings up in Elliott Lake and what the impact of the tailings would be on the environment. So that introduced me into nuclear in a big way. And over the last few years, I've gotten more involved in nuclear power generation and what's required to make that happen. So I wouldn't call myself an esteemed expert. There's a lot of people out there who are significantly smarter than I am when it comes to nuclear sciences. I'm one that's been adapting to the changing world and being able to introduce nuclear to a lot of my friends and and colleagues as well as clients, and what nuclear can do for a community in the Arctic, or let's say even in Africa, for example.
So if you're talking about Africa or the Arctic of Canada, what are some of the fundamentals that are challenging to serve power to people?
Both Africa and the Arctic had one thing in common, and that is harsh environments. So in African environments, obviously you have deserts and it's very arid and not much water. In the Arctic, similar situation. It's a lot colder up there, obviously, but the amount of water available for cooling is not there. So both require a particular type of SMR, or as we call them now, advanced modular reactors, AMRs, to be able to fit the need in those particular areas of use. So what we're looking for in both locations are SMRs or AMRs that do not require a lot of water. And right now, the world and the US and others are developing these type of reactors that where you don't need water for cooling. They're using things like molten salt, molten lead, helium, or air in some cases as being the medium to be able to generate electricity.
Now, we've been hearing quite a lot about it. Initially, as you say, it was small, modular, and now there seems to be a preference for advanced. I don't know if that's because they're not as small as we thought, or maybe advanced is a better term. But even though we're talking about them, are they real? Like, is there a deployable commercial product today?
Yes, there is. We can see what is happening right here in Canada, Darlington, Ontario Power Generation's nuclear power plant. They're erecting the first SMR for GE Hitachi 300 megawatt facility. That's one of four. There will be four built on the site. So we've gone from concept to actually building it, getting concrete in the ground, getting pipestone, and building a modular system in Canada. So Canada will be the first G7 country to have one up and working, and it should be operational by 2030. So that's the big step forward. So we've gone from the drawing board to actually getting it going on the ground. And that's one of many SMRs that are in the world. Like there's also Rolls-Royce, for example. Westinghouse has their version of it. X Energy, NuScale. There's a number of small modular reactor vendors out there who are looking to get licenses for their products to be able to get them out to the public and generate electricity.
Now, it's happening in Darlington. We've got companies like Westinghouse that have got a significant Canadian dimension to them, if I'm not mistaken. And what you're doing, you're in Toronto. Is there something Canadian about this story that has given us an edge as a country, or are we just doing what everyone else is doing?
We have a big edge, and people don't recognize it. Really, Canada has not developed a reactor. They've had indications of developing their own reactor. But what we've been able to do is make them work operationally, as well as our governance. So what I mean by operationally, you look at what's happening at Darlington, and now Pickering, as well as Bruce Power. We've been able to refurbish all these reactors. In other words, bring them back to life, extend their lifetimes. As opposed to what other countries do, they tend to just basically tear them down and demolish them. Canada's taken another practical approach, and we've invested all this money in here. Let's see how much more we can get out of it. And what they've done is refurbish the reactors to get more life out of them. So you're going to see these reactors operating for 90 years, right? That's a significant return on investment than what they originally thought. Rather than tear them down, let's reinvest and let's make them grow. And this demonstrates Canadian innovation, ingenuity. We don't have a lot of money, but the money that we have, we invested correctly, and we've invested in the operation and the rebuilds of these reactors to make them last longer.
Now, Ontario is quite reliant on electricity it gets from nuclear. Is that true?
Correct. It's about, I think it's almost 60 to 70% of the electricity.
60. So 6 out of 10 toasters in Toronto run from nuclear.
Probably, yeah, it's probably a good way to look at it.
Roughly. Yeah, okay. Is that high, or is that sort of average for a nuclear jurisdiction?
Is it high? I don't really know if I can compare it to other jurisdictions like
France is maybe up there, maybe even higher, right?
Yeah, France would be higher because they're virtually all on nuclear as opposed to hydro. Ontario is split between nuclear and hydro. We no longer have fossil fuel generation here, but we do have some gas generation here. for peak instances. But it's compatible to France, so it makes good sense to generate power.
Another example, we mentioned France, but we could also point to Germany. And I'm always curious, and I'd like to get your views on this, because I just don't understand why Germany exited nuclear entirely. They shut down all of their nuclear. Here's a clean, green, zero emissions, reliable, once you get it running, economical way of getting your power. It let them build this post-war industrial manufacturing behemoth of a country, and now they've decided, let's throw that in the bin. We don't like it. What the heck happened to Germany?
I can't really speak for them, but from my point of view, they got caught up with the green energy highway, and they wanted to be sustainable, and they were worried about what was happening with nuclear. You had Fukushima, which caused them to make a U-turn away from nuclear, and that caused them to think and say, well, no, nuclear is too dangerous. We don't want to get involved in it. There's too many potential consequences with it. So they reverted to using renewables, solar, wind, etc. But what they ended up finding is that using solar and wind as a replacement for coal doesn't quite work. So now they've pivoted, and I think they are now seriously considering nuclear could be a step forward for us, because it does provide green, clean, sustainable power.
Is there maybe a technology of nuclear that isn't going to create the same fears, whatever those were in Germany, that led to it being phased out?
The new reactors, right, the SMRs, they basically closed down on themselves. The Fukushima, the other larger reactors, their technology had a little bit of challenge because they weren't the new one. They weren't the brand new or the newer reactors. Fukushima and Chernobyl were older reactors. They didn't have all the safety considerations that the new reactors have now. So there's a different technology, different safety requirements that we have now that weren't there. The new reactors, they basically turn themselves off if something goes sideways. So they're safer, they last longer, and they require less operational maintenance than we had before. It's just the advancement that people have done on these reactors. So they're a lot safer now than they've ever been.
And that's what's going into Darlington, or at least part of it.
Yeah, Darlington is now, the SMRs at Darlington are new generation small modular reactors that have been developed at GE Hitachi.
So that's maybe why Canadians don't get nervous when we're talking about nuclear, even though in BC, I'm in Vancouver, even though it's against the law to have nuclear in BC, not that there's any likelihood of that happening soon, it would seem, but I don't think anyone I know would say, I'm concerned if we did have nuclear, because there is this Ontario-based confidence in having that very safe industry in Ontario that served it so well for so long. And it's almost invisible. People don't think about it very much.
It's like the back of your mind right now. It's going to be a reliable power generating 24/7 for you, so you don't really think about it. And I suspect in due course, Alberta is looking to develop nuclear in the province. Saskatchewan is committing to nuclear. We've seen New Brunswick involved in nuclear. So I can start seeing more and more provinces interested in developing, their own nuclear power assets to power their needs, whether it be, not what do we call them? There are data centers, for example, or other things, or industry that require electricity or very high heat. They're going to be turning to nuclear as being their chosen source of power.
You can kind of figure in the golden horseshoe of Ontario, there's 10, 11 million people. There's a lot of thousands of factories and millions of hair dryers. So yeah, it makes sense to have nuclear, but that's not what we were talking about in Calgary recently. This is for a tiny population. How many people are in Northwest Territories? Is it not more than 40,000 or so? Is it across the whole north of Canada? There's not much into 6 digits population, I believe. And why would such a tiny population want to be served with something as large scale as you get serving a Germany or a France or an Ontario? What would be the appeal?
That's a great question. Why would you want to put up small modular reactors up in the north? There are a number of reasons to do that. One is the industry development there. You have mining camps being developed there, so mining needs the energy there. You have the military now. We've heard about protecting the North and protecting the Arctic. The new military installations will require power as well. So this is going to drive the need for
Right.
sustainable nuclear power or sustainable power in the North with low risk on fuel. Right now,
Right.
the North is being pushed by or being operated on diesel. And with that comes risk in being able to get enough diesel up there. And then when you have the diesel there, it's got to sit in tankers, chances of leaks, and all that sort of stuff that can happen up there. With nuclear, you don't worry about that because you go up there, you set up a reactor, small modular reactor. It can run from either 5 megawatts to 60 megawatts, whatever you need, and that will generate the power for that industry. But you also have heat, and that heat can be provided to nearby communities for their needs, whether it be for hot water, heating their homes, or in fact just having electricity. So I don't think the communities themselves will drive the drive to nuclear. It will be the industry, and the communities will benefit from having that industry there to generate the power and heat that they need.
That would give some motivation to keep those industries healthy and there, because I've heard a lot of concerns. Another thing that came up in Calgary was that they're seeing industry close down. Mines are getting to end of life, and as it happens in the world of mining, if you want to have mining, you need to have the next mine, the next ore body that is waiting in line for that. And if you have a gap there, that can create a lot of human dislocation and economic uncertainty, which is also what we're seeing in the North. So do you see potentially that nuclear is being talked about by some of his clients or customers, the right term, the people who want your product, as being part of making economic investment stickier? If they can say, hey, we're going to have nuclear for you, and that will allow your industry to operate for decades into the future?
In fact, that's already started. We've had some of our mining clients interested in knowing what would it take to develop a nuclear facility up in the North somewhere. So we've looked at that with them and come up with some analysis on how nuclear can work up there. The interesting thing is when you're developing a mining facility, it takes about 15 years to develop it from soup to nuts, I think, to get the permits and be able to start digging out the ore. That's almost the same time frame it'll take for new nuclear reactors to get permitted and whatever. So the time scale could work well. One of the other things that we are working with them to is that if you are going to develop new mines and new facilities, think about what you need now, right? So like for data centers, for example, they can put up a data center in 2 years. Like it's incredible how quickly these guys can get these things up. But we can't put up a nuclear power plant in 2 years. It takes us some more time. But why not start thinking about, right, for the time being, let's see the stopgap measure, let's say gas-fired turbines. And then with the idea is that eventually we will shift to nuclear down the road when the nuclear SMRs are fully developed and can be dropped in there. So we're working them to think about just not now, but think about what's going to happen in the future, so you are ready for it. It's going to be a bit of a bigger footprint that you need for storage of fuel and stuff like that. But start thinking about it now rather than waiting for when it's convenient. Because what's going to happen is that there's going to be a big demand, and you're going to be at the back of the line waiting for the next SMR to come off the assembly plant.
Anyone who owns a globe has probably done what I used to love to do, is turn it around and look at the world from different perspectives. If you take a globe, take the Earth, and you look at it top down, so the Arctic is what you're seeing, it looks kind of different than we think of it usually. And what you see is there's Canada, but also there's Russia, there's Alaska, there's some European countries like Finland, there's Greenland. That's what you see. You start to think maybe about the geopolitics of energy. How do you see nuclear fitting into that different perspective of the world?
Becomes interesting. We already have a nuclear facility in Russia in their Arctic generating power. It's on a ship that they took up to their Arctic to power a mine in a community up there. So it's already happening.
Really?
Up there. Finland and the Nordics, they've been talking about nuclear in their areas as well. So they're collaborating with Canadian companies or excuse me, global companies about putting nuclear up there. So the political part of that, I'm not too concerned about. I think everyone wants to be able to generate power and keep the Arctic solvent. Our interest in Canada is to keep our Arctic solvent, and the only way we're going to be able to do that is by allowing the military to establish their radar and fields up in the north to be able to monitor what's going on. So geopolitically, it will be sort of an enhancement and give them more credibility and be able to generate power there in a long-term period.
Recently, at the event you spoke at, I had a conversation with someone who brought a new idea forward. At least it was new to me, this triple use idea. This was a former head of the Canadian Armed Forces, General Wayne Eyre, was on our panel. And this idea of triple use is, well, three things being used or served, I guess, the populace, industry, and security or the military. And the things that are likeliest to happen in terms of the future of the North will be tied up in making sure that things have triple use. How do you see nuclear fitting into this concept?
It's ideally suited for that concept, Stuart. The military need to have secure power 24/7. Right, the industry needs to have power availability, and the communities need heat and power as well. So nuclear can fit into all three buckets, if you like, to be able to do that. And that's the one great thing about nuclear. It just doesn't generate electricity. It can also generate heat for communities as well. So it can fit into all three buckets and serve not more than one thing at any time.
So in the north, where you don't have, say, hydro dams, at least not year-round in some places, you don't have a big scale-out of wind and solar, you do have diesel, you don't see a lot of natural gas used at this point in time for generation of power that I'm aware of. So the options are kind of limited compared to what you have in the south.
Right.
So if you want to be able to support these developments of security, of industry, of human health, and being able to stay warm, nuclear starts to make a lot of sense.
It does. And it's really finding the right reactor or the right SMR for the application, right? So that's going to be a key things there. Like, what do you need the SMR? What are the advantages and disadvantages of having a nuclear SMR sitting there?
So there's different kinds.
There's different types of reactors that you can have there. That's one of the important things to look at. Not all shoes fit the same foot, or
right.
different feet.
And what are the differences?
Well, so we have, as we talk about, there are what we call water-based reactors, such as the boiling water reactor, which the GE Hitachios. And all of these, they rely on water as being a coolant as part of the mix. So if you don't have water, you're not going to be able to really generate the steam to turn a turbine and generate electricity. You have new reactors. That's what we talked about, the advanced modular reactors who don't rely on water. They rely on other media such as helium, salt, molten salt, and molten lead as the coolant, and that will then generate heat and steam from that. The real trick comes in is that these are different from traditional. And one of the questions that we usually have to try to figure out an answer is, well, okay, what do you do with the waste from these reactors? Because they're all going to be different now. So we have to come up a way of, how do we handle that waste safely and be able to store it away in a deep geological repository for years to come. So that's where we start coming in and start having to figure out all these different things. When we talk to the population, they're never worried about the operation of a nuclear reactor. They're worried about, what are you doing with the waste that comes out of these things? Who's going to handle it? How do you handle it? Is that safe?
Well, how much waste are we talking about?
Basically, for most people, it doesn't amount to a lot. I know when you look at everything, sounds like a lot, but like waste, it's about, I don't know, a couple of buckets per person. over the
Over,
lifetime,
right.
over a lifetime. So it doesn't generate a lot of waste. And what they're actually thinking of doing now, which I think is really innovative, is they're taking some of the spent fuel reactor rods that we have in Canada and being able to recycle them through the advanced reactors to be able to siphon more energy out of those reactors. So it's really cool what the thing. So it's almost like, let's reuse the waste. It's like energy from waste
Yeah,
that they're trying to do.
that's what we want to hear more about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is in the cards. They're looking at that at some of the applications because they'll be able to siphon more of that power. And then once they get it down to nothing, they'll just put it back underground again. So part of the exercise in the waste business now is not only do you have to dispose of it safely, but in some cases you want to be able to dispose of it, but be able to retrieve it back because there might be a subsequent use for it as well. So we're thinking ahead in the industry on what to do.
Okay, so it's safe, it's manageable, it's deployable. It's I guess desirable for national aims if you think about security and industrial development. Is it affordable?
If you look at the cost, Ontario Power Generation has done a cost analysis of this, and over the lifetime of their reactors, so their 90-year reactor, let's say, if you consider the cost of the fuel, the cost of maintenance, people to run the reactor, all that sort of stuff, and you add that all up, for the power that's generated, it looks like it's generating power at 10 cents a kilowatt. The SMRs that you're proposing to put in there, when they do the same sort of life cycle cost analysis, they're looking at about 14 cents a kilowatt. So for over the long haul, it can be very affordable. Generating nuclear power is a long game, right? You're not in there to make money over a short period of time. Anyone that's in it, they're in it for the long haul. So that's how you can get the cost down significantly, by taking a look at what the big picture is, not what the immediate picture is. We're thinking generations and generations beyond our lifetime.
Those price figures you mentioned, those aren't out of line with what people pay if they're in Vancouver or Saskatoon or Toronto, pretty much in that range, maybe a little at the high end depending on where you are.
Anywhere you are.
Certainly not as high as some places in the US. I think in California you hear about multiple of that as being just standard.
Even looking up at the Arctic, like they're paying almost like some cases $1.50 a kilowatt. Kilowatt hour. So it gets expensive depending on the fuel source that you're using. But like I said, this nuclear is for the long haul. So if you're not in for the long haul, this is not the business for you to be in.
Maybe you need big long haul thinkers. You need backstopping perhaps from governments, territorial governments, the federal government, or not. What's your thought on that?
I think we need visionaries in the business who are not just looking at what's going to happen now, but they're looking at the generations to come. So when you talk with the Indigenous people, they're not worried about what's happening now. They're worried about 7 generations down, what are they going to have to look forward to? And nuclear fits into that type of long-term vision for the country, for the nation.
Have you had meetings with First Nations leaders, with Indigenous leaders from the North?
In the North, no. I personally don't have the meetings with them. I only get called in if it's the chief wants to have a discussion. But my people have been involved in a few consultations on nuclear, both on the nuclear waste side as well as the new nuclear builds as well. We've had some very powerful discussions with them going forward, and they ask some very interesting questions.
Yes, and I don't know what those questions are, but in my own experience, where I've traveled in the North, I find that often the lived reality and what one encounters is quite different than what maybe you'd expect if you relied on some of the typical sources of information that you get if you don't stray out of the city too much. You might think, well, Northern Indigenous peoples would like to live traditionally in ways they lived for centuries and do so indefinitely into the future. Not always true. I've found also the attitude towards industrial development can be quite surprising, because I hear over and over from those in leadership positions in Indigenous Canada that being able to keep families together, to give motivation to the young to go and get educated and get a job and be part of building some kind of life for themselves. That requires, doing things and having energy for that. I often discover that my expectations are completely turned upside down, but by what I encounter. And I think with nuclear, that maybe is one of those things.
What's interesting is my people have told me that when they've gone into to engage with the communities, you know, surprisingly, they don't ask, is it safe? That's not what they're asking for. They're asking, first question that comes out is, why here? And what are the benefits to my community from having this project, whether it's nuclear or gas or what have you? What's the benefit to my people here now and in the future? Which finds out, which is quite interesting. Like they if they seem to trust you that the technology is safe, or you wouldn't be doing it here. But why here? Why did you choose this particular place? And that's a fascinating discussion to have with them, and understanding what where they're coming from and what their needs are.
So nuclear is one of those areas where Canada has really been a quiet success story. And that leads me to ask, what does Canada need to do to, say, over the next 5 years, next 10 years, to not squander its nuclear advantage? Because even though we're really great at some things, it has to be said that we sometimes are a little fast and loose with not appreciating the potential we do have in some other areas.
Yeah.
So how do we keep this one likely to land?
That's a super question. I think practically got to deliver on Darlington. We got to get that up and working, and we got to demonstrate that we can build it on time and on budget, and it's going to be a success story. I think that is number one. We have to demonstrate to the world and to ourselves that we can do it. Next thing is by growing our supply chain in Canada. What we've seen is that the supply chain is dwindling. We need to reinforce it. We need to have more kids coming into the business to work in the industry. We're sort of cracking jokes that the supply chain is decaying at a faster rate than the nuclear reactors. Which is sort of scary because a lot of our brain trust is leaving the industry. Like some of our youngest people now are sort of guys like us who have gray hair. So that we need to get more people into the business and get them motivated and excited about being involved in nuclear. So let's get Darlington working. Let's get the communities involved, and let's build our supply chain that it's going to be sustainable into the future. So if we can do that in the next 5 years, we're on our way to energy sustainability and to sovereignty.
That is a great insight. I'd like to just go back and dig into something, because I always like to learn about career paths, because I know there are people who come to Power Struggle because themselves, or maybe there's someone in their family who's planning a career. And I know in the Canadian natural resource space generally, there's such great livelihoods because you're connected to growing the economy. You're directly connected in your job to doing things that have that direct value. And I think often that's part of having a well-paying and secure job. But in the case of nuclear, you're concerned that it's not the hottest career option. Is that the issue? Is it a sort of a perception thing? Is it a shortage of people with the skills, or what's going on?
Well, what happened? Remember when we talked about that? Nuclear was in vogue for a while, right? People were, there weren't people getting into the industry because they didn't see much happening yet, because they just, it wasn't vogue. People were turning away from it. In Germany, the whole country turned away from nuclear. And what we're starting to see now is there's a pickup. There's a big interest in nuclear because it's green, because it's sustainable, because you need to have educated, smart, skilled people in the industry to make it work, because we're getting involved in AI and all that sort of stuff too. So we're now seeing it like the nuclear is vogue. People want to get into it, but there aren't enough people. There's been a gap in that business. There's one, and I would say, what did you say, 30 years ago, 40 years ago? Nuclear, we had the reactors going, Darlington was going, Bruce was going, but then it stalled. And now people left the industry. And it's going to take us time to rebuild that education, to rebuild that skill set, to be able to do that work now in the future. So we need to get more people involved in the business going forward.
Well, I can see a lineup forming at the, what's the preeminent place to get that kind of education if you want to go into the engineering side of nuclear?
Right now, the Ontario Technology University in towards Peterborough in that area, that's where we're turning out a lot of great students, engineer with practical experience. Obviously, the other one is McMaster University as well. They're putting out they have a great nuclear program there. And if I remember correctly, I believe University of Saskatchewan is also generating people. So on the Canadian side of things, those are three preemptive universities that you can get involved in and get a great education. And there's still more training. Like, if you have an interest in training and you're a skills tradesman, there's companies who are looking for you that can put you through a nuclear safety training program to make you nuclear ready as well.
What's a good way to learn more?
Get involved. A couple of great websites or associations to check out would be for example, the Organization of Nuclear Industries. I will send you a couple of websites for your audience to check out as well.
We'll share those.
Yep, and as well as a Canadian Nuclear Association. But they are out there. I'll send it to you, and you can share with the audience to have a look there and get involved in nuclear.
Dr. Anthony Ciccone, you're Senior Vice President of the Global Nuclear Sector at WSP. Thank you for a genuinely illuminating conversation today.
Well, thank you for your time and much appreciated. Look forward to continuing the conversation with you.
Yes, there's just so much to do in delivering energy that the people need. And also, I think it's a reminder that Canada's energy story isn't just about the cities, about the South. It's about every community that isn't hooked up to the grid. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure. Just remember, nuclear is cool.
Nuclear is cool. Okay, folks, if this episode gave you a new perspective on what it takes to power the remote North, share it with someone you know, someone who cares about energy, about policy, about Canada's future. Also, please subscribe to Power Struggle on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, on YouTube. We're both an audio and a video podcast. So wherever you get podcasts, you can get Power Struggle. Thanks for listening. Stay curious, stay engaged, and we'll see you next time on Power Struggle.